Hello and welcome to Railroad Journeys Around the World. In this programme, we'll be looking closely at Ireland's current and highly stimulating rail scene. As we shall see, Ireland's railways draw on a rich railway heritage, which is still very much in evidence today. This, coupled with splendid scenery and a warm welcome throughout the island, make Ireland the ideal country in which to expand your horizons. In the Republic of Ireland, virtually all rail services are focused on Dublin. From the two principal city centre stations at Connolly and Houston, you can catch a direct intercity train to most parts of Ireland. But Dublin also boasts a very interesting and rapidly growing network of suburban services for commuters and city centre shoppers. Suburban trains from Dublin Connolly to Drogheda in the north are locomotive hauled, in this case using one of the distinctive single-cab locomotives built by General Motors in the 1960s. Connolly is not only a terminus for the Drogheda service, but also a through station for the electrified and distinctive green-liveried Dart service, which runs between Bray and Howth. On the way to Drogheda, local trains make 10 intermediate calls. Trade is reassuringly brisk, although at present the service isn't all that frequent, about once an hour off-peak with some extra trains in the rush hour. Although the coaches are of a BR Mark III pattern, they benefit from the standard continental practice of having remotely closed plug doors. Most trains from Drogheda are push-pull operated, so the turnaround times on what's a fairly short itinerary can be kept to a minimum. The local service doesn't have the monopoly of these tracks. There are also intercity and freight services between Dublin and Belfast, as well as mineral trains from the freight-only King's Court branch on the left. All in all, Drogheda is one of the best places to witness the wide variety of Irish rail operations today. That rare luxury by British standards of being hauled or pushed by a diesel locomotive is an everyday occurrence on Irish rail. The traction will inevitably be a General Motors product, as all Irish rail locomotives since the 1960s have either been built or re-engined with General Motors traction units. Most of the coaching stock in use today is of British design, with sizable fleets based on both Mark IID and Mark III body shells. However, the 5 driving trailer coaches were produced by Irish Rail at Inchicore Works from Mark III body shells. It's a refreshing contrast to a rather depressing current British scene. Irish Rail is actually expanding its services and winning new traffic from other transport modes, despite the fact that Ireland, with a total population of only 5 million people, has relatively few major cities and very little heavy industry. Privatisation in the Republic of Ireland is definitely not on the agenda, and among Irish rail managers there's a mood of optimism that would be hard to find anywhere on British rail today.
I'm delighted to say that during the past 2 years we carried more passengers on our rail network than ever before in the history of the rail network. And our goal over the next 5 years is to go on from there and to provide a quality customer-driven service and grow the business even further.
The flagship of Dublin's suburban railway network is the Dublin Area Rapid Transit System, usually referred to as DART. This is a high-quality, high-frequency electrified railway linking Dublin city centre with Howth in the north and Bray in the south. The DART system was commissioned in the early 1980s, and its concept was nothing short of total route modernisation. In all, 22.5 route miles were electrified, and 40 two-car electric multiple units were built. Although DART is a quite distinctive and unique operation, it fits well into the overall pattern of public transport in Dublin. Indeed, it follows the best of European practice and complements rather than competes with other services.
There are dark tickets available which allow flexibility to interchange. And our commuter tickets, be they weekly commuter tickets or monthly commuter tickets, are very, very popular. They allow interchange not only between DART and other suburban services, but also between our own rail services and the services that are offered by Dublin Bus within the City of Dublin, and of course Bus Éireann as well.
The DART trains are of German origin and were supplied by Linke Hoffmann Busch. They normally operate in 4-car formation and provide a service frequency ranging from every 15 minutes off-peak to every 4 or 8 minutes in the morning and evening rush hours. Another aspect of DART's integration into the national rail network is that the tracks are shared with Irish Rail mainline passenger and freight services for most of the route. The premier main line in the Republic of Ireland links the capital Dublin and the country's second city, Cork. It's double track all the way to Cork, and the track has been progressively upgraded and re-signalled for the benefit of the comparatively heavy regular traffic flows it handles, ranging from intercity passenger to bulk chemicals and liner trains. The line to Cork starts at Dublin Heuston, where the station building in grandiose Corinthian style is ranked among the finest of Irish railway architecture. It was completed in 1844 as a suitably imposing gateway to the Great Southern and Western Railway, the design having been selected from a total of 20 competition entries. Today, Heuston remains busy with intercity trains not only to Cork, but also to Westport, Galway, Limerick, Tralee and Waterford. In short, it serves the majority of mainline destinations in the Republic of Ireland. Heuston, with its 5 terminal platforms, is the only station in Dublin not on a through route, but its importance has increased in recent years with the diversion of Westport and Galway trains to serve Heuston instead of Connolly. Irish rail management is constantly looking at ways of improving services and attracting new sources of revenue. The latest initiative on the Cork line is a high-quality package for business customers, which is just one example of Irish Rail's willingness to think creatively.
The most recent new product that we've introduced has been our City Gold product, which is a new super standard first-class service on the Dublin-Cork line. We went out, carried out detailed market research of our existing customers and potential new customers. They told us that they needed something new, something more comfortable, better facilities, and we have provided that, and you can now travel from Dublin to Cork on our City Gold service. We branded it City Gold. You can sit in a much more comfortable seat. We have hostess attention for any assistance that you need. We've got telephone facilities, we've got fax facilities. You can sit and get your headphones and listen to the morning news or listen to some relaxing music if you so wish.
The set is complemented by this splendid matching open lounge car, available for exclusive private functions. It's 165 miles from Dublin to Cork. The fastest weekday service takes 2.5 hours, with intermediate stops at Limerick Junction and Mallow. In all, there are 7 trains each way, Mondays to Saturdays, and 4 on Sundays. Flying to Ireland is an attractive option if you intend travelling around by public transport or wish to hire a car. One advantage is the choice of destinations, which includes Galway, Shannon, Sligo, Dublin, Belfast and Cork, with plenty of regular daily flights from most major UK airports. Typical return fares are about £80. Mallow, a small spa town with an interesting history, is well known today as a sugar beet processing centre. It's also the junction for the popular holiday destination of Killarney in the west. The station has a relaxing, open, continental feel about it and provides a pleasant spot to watch the intense activity as the intercity and branch line trains connect. Trains on the Tralee branch are not quite so up to date, though the very fact that they're loco-hauled puts them a league ahead of many similar provincial services on British Rail. There are through trains from Tralee to both Dublin and Cork, with trains bound for Cork having to run round here at Mallow before continuing south. Passengers arriving at Cork can enjoy both the comfort and convenience of a modern intercity station while savouring the impressive architecture of this one-time terminus of the Great Southern and Western Railway, originally known as Glanmire Road. Early railways around Cork were developed piecemeal, and it wasn't until 1868 that a link was provided beyond Glanmire Road to allow through running onto Cove and Youghal. Most of today's trains are well filled, with passengers taking advantage of the various Irish Rail offers, such as half-price travel for young people and discounts for families, groups and regular travellers. The station buildings are located on the downside of the station and used to house a railway hotel. Trains for Dublin and Tralee can leave from either of the two through platforms. In this case, it's the 12:40 departure for Tralee, with just 2 passenger carrying vehicles, plus the obligatory steam heating generator van bringing up the rear. Compared to the UK, there are sadly very few examples of early steam locos that have been preserved in Ireland. One notable exception still to be seen on Cork Station main concourse is this very impressive Great Southern and Western loco, built in Liverpool during 1848. Although Ireland is a relatively small country, sorting mail on the move is obviously still considered worthwhile. These mail vans are used on the nightly travelling post office working between Dublin and Cork. The vans in use today were built mainly in the 1950s. Lower quadrant semaphores are very much the norm in Ireland, even in the Republic's second city. Here they're guarding the western exit from Cork Station as the local train from Cove reaches its journey's end. Although in geographical terms the Cove branch is simply a continuation of the main line from Dublin, it's operated as an entirely separate service. It's a very short journey of just 11 miles from Cork to Cove, and all trains are loco-hauled. The stock employed on this service is a typical set of Craven coaches, the first to use an all-steel construction, and which date back to the 60s. The Cove branch is double-track throughout and follows the picturesque Lee estuary for most of its length. It was constructed in 2 stages. The first part from Cork to Cove Junction was opened in 1860 as part of the Youghal branch, while the remaining section from Cove Junction to Cove Harbour was opened 2 years later. Even in the mid-19th century, Cove was a lively transatlantic port, and that was a crucial factor in the line's development. Carrigallow still has many delightful features, even though, like the other 5 intermediate stations between Cork and Cove, it no longer has any resident staff. Certainly it's nice to see something a little more characterful than the bare platform and bus shelter image of many BR branches. A sad sight is the abandoned terminus here at nearby Youghal, though the track and buildings are surprisingly well preserved. It saw its last scheduled passenger train as long ago as 1963, with freight services lingering on until the 80s. The other principal city on the south coast, internationally famed for its fine cut glass, is Waterford. The main rail route here is from Dublin Heuston via Kilkenny, and there's the cross-country line from Limerick through Waterford to Rosslare. There's also intense freightliner traffic from the port. On the main route from Dublin, there are 4 trains each way on weekdays and 3 on Sundays. The haulage on this occasion is, rather untypically, an example of the venerable 001 class, or A class as they were first known. 58 of these locomotives, which were originally built by Metropolitan Vickers in Manchester, were re-engined in the late 1960s with General Motors traction units. But they too are rapidly becoming life expired and are now largely relegated to local passenger or freight duties. The signalman certainly enjoys a bird's eye view from this unusual structure, straddling the platform loop and through lines. This 64-lever frame controls movements in the immediate station area and is fitted with block instruments working to neighbouring boxes at Waterford West and Abbey Junction. Since all trains are loco-hauled, there's quite a bit of interesting shunting to be done around the station area. Ensuring the steam heating pipes are connected is still an essential job on many routes, where carriage heat is supplied from a separate steam generator carriage. Waterford is yet another station where old features have been sensitively retained alongside the provision of modern passenger amenities. Over a century separates the ornate signs and ironwork from the business side of the station, with its busy parcels office, buffet bar and modern administrative centre. The cross-country line between Limerick and Rosslare has a very sparse service. In summer there are just 2 trains a day each way covering the whole route, plus this third train on the stretch between Waterford and Rosslare. However, Waterford does generate plenty of rail freight traffic from the deep-water port and container terminal. In fact, the port is so busy that it's at present being relocated further downriver. The Irish freight scene as a whole is also impressively buoyant when you take into account the small size of the country. One of the most distinctive long-distance daily flows is anhydrous ammonia from Merino Point near Cork to Shelton Abbey Fertiliser Works on the Dublin to Rosslare line. It's a pretty deadly substance that's far safer kept off Ireland's roads. Each train has one of these special barrier wagons at the front and rear as an extra precaution. Another bulk flow carries zinc and lead ore from Tara Mines near Navan on the freight-only Kings Court branch to Dublin Harbour for export. There can be up to 4 block trains each day, each consisting of 10 or 11 bogie tippler wagons. Thankfully, the Irish government appears to have a rather more enlightened attitude to rail freight than the British one, and Irish Rail is actually increasing its share of the freight market. As well as the bulk traffics, Irish Rail has a network of liner trains carrying maritime and domestic containers between about a dozen freight depots. The Belfast to Dublin corridor remains busy despite the rerouting of BR's Irish traffic to Dublin. But the biggest volume of freight on Irish Rail is actually cement, in stark contrast to Britain, where almost all cement now goes by road. Some of the cement is carried in bulk form in tanks like these being delivered north of the border. Irish Rail also carries quite a lot of bagged cement to some of the smaller storage depots. If you'd like to find out more about rail freight in Ireland, be sure to look out for the special Irish edition of Rail Freight Today, which deals extensively with this most appealing aspect of Irish railway operations. The main line west from Dublin's Connolly station follows a long meandering route to Sligo, while the other main route west runs from Dublin Heuston to Galway, Westport and Ballina. The Sligo line is basically single track, but with passing loops at most of the stations. The rather infrequent intercity service is boosted in the Dublin area by suburban trains, such as this one that's carrying early morning commuters from Mullingar. Here at Enfield, there'll be a short wait while the first departure of the day from Dublin to Sligo passes in the other direction. Although there are only 3 trains a day to Sligo, with a 4th one on Fridays, the service is well used and always formed of modern air-conditioned coaches. The driver today has obviously been practicing his aim. This almost timeless scene is still repeated throughout the network each day on Ireland's railways. The station here was actually closed in 1975, but then reopened in the 80s for the new suburban service from Mullingar. Traces of the steam era are still much in evidence, even though dieselisation came early to the Sligo line, just as it did to Islands Railways in general. Maynooth is the starting point for most of the Sligo line suburban workings. Now there are 8 intermediate stations between Maynooth and Dublin, all of them built or reopened since 1981. So far the trains have been formed of rather elderly loco-hauled stock, but change is on the way, as Irish Rail passenger manager Joe Marr explains.
We have 17 rail cars on order which are due to be delivered in April of next year, and we plan to upgrade our services to the west, to Maynooth, and to the north and to the south. And then at a later stage there'll be further upgrading on the Kildare line, bringing in new locations such as Clondalkin into the network.
Alongside the revitalisation of Dublin's commuter network, there's still room for a bit of nostalgia. Irish Rail has a long tradition of working together with preservation groups, especially the Railway Preservation Society of Ireland. Ever since the mid-1960s, the RPSI has organised a comprehensive programme of mainline steam tours, and over the years these have covered virtually every line in the country. In this particular instance, number 461 worked from Dublin right across Ireland to Westport. The K2-260 was built in 1922 by Bayer Peacock of Manchester. Its first owner was the Dublin and South Eastern Railway, but most of its career was spent in the ownership of the Great Southern Railways and their nationalised successor, Cora Sompa Iran. It was finally withdrawn in 1965. Number 461 is one of only 4 steam locos currently passed to work on the Irish Main Line. The well-equipped operating base where the Irish Main Line steam fleet is maintained is at Whitehead, to the north of Belfast in Northern Ireland. This splendid 440 built for the Irish Great Northern Railway has also been restored to full working order. The date on its works plate actually refers to a major midlife rebuild. The loco first entered service in 1913. This and many other items of vintage traction and rolling stock in differing states of repair are stabled here at the RPSI headquarters at Whitehead. Maintaining and restoring Ireland's steam fleet is a mammoth task, as all those involved in railway preservation will know, but one which is universally appreciated once the end result can be seen at work. Today, the Sligo line is effectively an isolated route from Dublin, the connecting line to Athlone having lost its regular service in the late 1980s. But Sligo remains an important source of traffic, both for freight and passenger, and there are certainly no plans for further cutbacks. While the main routes to Belfast and Cork will inevitably steal the limelight, other lines like this one to Sligo are certainly not being forgotten.
The government have gone on record as saying in the past 12 months that they regard the rail infrastructure as a very important part of the infrastructure of the country. They're determined to maintain it. We're delighted to hear those words being repeated so often over the past few months, and our plans are to invest in lines such as the Sligo line, bring it up to certainly 90 miles per hour standard, put good equipment on it, market it and develop the business there.
The terminus at Sligo still betrays its Midland Great Western Railway origins, although it's a shame that the overall roof has gone. The track layout with its centre roads is typical of 19th century practice, and much of the original architecture at Sligo is still there to be enjoyed by all. Today, all scheduled trains for Galway and Westport run from Dublin Heuston via Kildare. But the link between Mullingar and Athlone, which is retained on a care and maintenance basis, is very occasionally made available for specials. Irish Rail has an enlightened policy of not ripping up disused track for the sake of it, and today there are several abandoned branch lines that could be reopened relatively cheaply if some suitable new traffic could be found. Here on the line between Mullingar and Athlone, the Steam Special was preceded by a test train a few days earlier just to make sure that everything was still in order. Whether this line will see regular trains again in the near future seems unlikely, but its strategic importance is certainly recognised by Irish Rail and by the Irish government. Both routes to the west converge here at Athlone before crossing the River Shannon on this impressive bridge, completed by the Midland Great Western Railway in 1851. The central span, which once opened for river shipping, hasn't been used for several decades. Just before the lines diverge again to Galway and Westport, trains have to negotiate the former Midland Great Western Railway station at Athlone. It was decided to close this in 1985, when Athlone's other station on the old Great Southern and Western route was reopened, although the shed and platforms are still intact today. Galway still boasts one of Ireland's finest old railway hotels, which remained in railway ownership until 1984. Galway was the prized coastal terminus on the Midland Great Western Railway, later being subsumed into the Great Southern Railway at the 1924 grouping. Today, Galway has just 4 trains each way to Dublin on weekdays, with an extra departure for Dublin on Monday mornings. Although fairly isolated in railway terms, this is a very popular tourist area, with plenty of impressive scenery nearby. The other tentacle from Athlone stretches out to Westport and Ballina. After leaving Athlone, the line crosses the undulating countryside of County Roscommon before reaching the junction station at Claremorris. If you're thinking of sampling one of the excellent 3-day long weekend steam tours organised by the RPSI, it's worth knowing that most ferry routes offer very considerable savings for flexible long weekend breaks to Ireland. Along the route there are numerous level crossings, many of which are still manned. Although the first automatic half barriers were installed in Ireland as early as 1962, they are still outnumbered by delightful traditional railway scenes like this. Although most crossing keepers don't have to resort to this rather direct method of pulling off the signals. The line to Claremorris, with its extensions to Westport and Ballina, was originally promoted by the small but rather grand-sounding Great Northern and Western Railway. By 1890, however, one of that company's principal directors had died, and it was amalgamated with the neighbouring Midland Great Western Railway. This gave the MGWR 4 principal termini on the west coast, and made it the second largest railway company at the 1924 grouping. On the whole, the weather in Ireland is even less settled than in England, and on this occasion it certainly made the rails very slippery for the hard climb away from Roscommon. All 65 miles of railway between Roscommon and Westport were built as single track in order to keep costs down in this sparsely populated area of the country. While the line to Galway was opened as early as 1851, the citizens of Claremorris had to wait until 1862 before their first train arrived. The extension to Westport was opened 4 years later in 1866, and the Ballina branch followed on in 1873. There can surely be no better way to savour the charm of Ireland's railway backwaters than like this. The RPSI is certainly not short of experience when it comes to organising 2- or 3-day steam tours. Over the years it's organised over 20 of them. Tour participants are able to combine some of the best of Irish traditions, enjoying a pint of Guinness and a friendly chat as the beautiful Irish countryside slips by. Claremorris itself was once a railway centre of some importance. As well as being the starting point for trains to Ballina, it also formed a junction with the cross-country line from Limerick to Sligo, which was operated by the rival Great Southern and Western Railway. There was also a short branch line from Claremorris to Ballinrobe. Today, only the principal east-west route remains in use, although this Sunday-only departure to Ballina does give the station an air of busyness. The line from Claremorris towards Athenry and Limerick is now closed, but most of the permanent way is still intact. There are hopes that this line might one day be revived by the West of Ireland Steam Railway Association. From Claremorris to Westport, the line meanders through very pleasant countryside, with just 2 intermediate stations, Manullah Junction, where the Ballina branch diverges, and Castlebar. The smaller town of Ballina is very much the poor relation of Westport in passenger terms, with the shuttle service from Manullah Junction boosted by just 1 through train from Dublin each week. But in freight terms, Ballina is important in its own right. It's the destination of 2 nightly liner trains from Dublin, one for general traffics and the other carrying chemicals for the local Asahi plant. There's no place for inflexible sub-sector dedication here. Sensibly, the locomotive from the passenger shuttle is also used to shunt the freight yard, making the most of what would otherwise be unproductive layover time. It's only a half-hour journey from Ballina to the main line at Manullah Junction, but loco haulage is still the norm, just as it is on most Irish rail services. The coaches here are part of the Park Royal set. The famous engineer Bulleid was closely involved in the design of these coaches, which were built in the mid-1950s. Needless to say, the Ballina branch has always been single-track. There's now just 1 intermediate station at Foxford, the other one at Ballyvary having been closed in 1963. The route south from Ballina is virtually level to Manullah Junction, providing a welcome rest for those on the footplate. On a clear day, the line offers splendid views of the Neffin Mountains, rising to just over 2,500 feet. If you're intending to explore Ireland by car rather than rail, remember you should get a green card from your car insurance company to cover you for the Republic of Ireland. Also, if you're intending to cross into the Republic from the north by car, there are still occasional security checks which may slow you down slightly. When touring in the Republic, also watch out for the road signs, which can sometimes be a bit confusing. The new ones are in kilometres, while old ones are still in miles. Most pubs, particularly in the popular tourist areas, do evening meals, and there are also some very reasonably priced restaurants to be found. You should allow a little more for eating out in Southern Ireland than in the UK. Hand-pumped beer isn't often to be found, but ample supplies of Ireland's most famous draft ale more than compensate for this. The province of Northern Ireland also has equally impressive scenery. Perhaps the most spectacular stretch of railway here is the coastal route between Coleraine and Londonderry, served by regular multiple unit trains to and from Belfast. Mussenden Temple, which can be seen perched on the cliff top, is part of the Downhill Castle estate and is now owned by the National Trust. Unfortunately, the original extensive rail network in Northern Ireland suffered drastic cutbacks in the 50s and 60s, leaving just a skeleton of routes between main centres. One of the remaining suburb routes from Belfast reaches out to the busy port of Larne, connecting with ferry services to Stranraer. Like much of the present-day railway system in Northern Ireland, the Larne branch was once owned by the English-based Midland Railway, and later its successor, the LMS, the idea being to tap the substantial amount of Anglo-Irish freight and passenger traffic. Today, there's a well-used local service calling at the dozen or so stations between Belfast and Larne. There are also limited stop trains connecting with the Stranraer ferry service from Scotland. Northern Ireland Railways has a quite different traction policy from Irish Rail. Almost all trains in the north are formed of multiple units, including 9 of these 450 class units built by British Rail Engineering in the mid-1980s. The butchering of the Northern Ireland railway system began as early as 1950, 2 years after the setting up of the road-oriented Ulster Transport Authority. A further blow came in 1965, when the Northern Ireland government decreed that all remaining routes should close except the cross-border line and some Belfast commuter services. Fortunately, the worst excesses of those proposals weren't put into practice, although there were some further closures. Dundalk is the old frontier station on the main line to Dublin. It's served mainly by intercity trains, but the occasional local train from Belfast does penetrate south over the border. This one is formed by a Class 80 unit built in the 1970s. Ireland's only international railway provides a direct link between the northern and southern capitals. Today its ownership is divided at the political border between Irish Rail and Northern Ireland Railways, but in operational terms both companies work over the whole route. Northern Ireland Railways has 3 111 class locomotives for its share of the cross-border duties. These are a classic General Motors product and are identical to the Irish Rail 071 class. On weekdays there are currently 6 trains a day between Belfast and Dublin. The fastest transit time for the 113-mile journey is 1 hour 55 minutes on the non-stop Enterprise. Representing an average speed of 59 miles an hour, that compares rather poorly with similar services in other parts of Europe. And certainly in the past, the Dublin-Belfast corridor has suffered from underinvestment. However, prospects now look much brighter.
On the Dublin-Belfast corridor, a major announcement has been made recently concerning investment in that corridor. A total of £88 million is being invested in the corridor. It's a giant investment project between Éireann Roth and Northern Ireland Railways, and we're working together on it.
The present intensive rebuilding work north of the border very occasionally provides the rare sight of a freight train hauled by a Northern Ireland Railways locomotive. All commercial freight activity within the province was transferred to road in the 1960s, and the only revenue-earning freight trains today are block services between Dublin and Belfast, plus the occasional fertiliser special to Londonderry. One delightful spot on the Dublin-Belfast route that will soon be swept away by modernisation is the mechanical signal and crossing box at Points Pass. It has the distinction of being the last outpost of manual signalling between Belfast and the border, and despite being on an intercity main line, still exudes the atmosphere of that more leisurely lifestyle usually associated with pre-nationalisation. The signal cabin, with its 24-lever frame, dates back to the days of the Great Northern Railway of Ireland. The Great Northern had a particularly interesting history. Because so many of its lines straddled the border, it remained a separate company until as recently as 1958. Only then were its assets split between the nationalised systems of South and North. Its numerous border crossings were also its downfall. The line once boasted a peak route mileage of over 600 miles in the 1920s. Today, the most prominent reminder that remains is this main line between Dublin and Belfast. The current modernisation plan isn't limited to infrastructure. There will also be 3 state-of-the-art new trains, each consisting of 7 cars with a driving cab at both ends. Unlike previous generations of rolling stock, the new trains will be painted in a common livery for Irish Rail and Northern Ireland Railways. Other parts of the system will benefit from investment too, with an influx of new motive power supplementing today's ageing fleet.
The average age of our locomotives now is almost 32 years of age. I'm delighted to say that we do have 10 new locomotives on order. They're General Motors locomotives on order from the United States. They will make an enormous difference to us in terms of improving reliability. We have plans to order a further 22 for delivery a year later, though the finance has to be finalised as yet, but we're confident that that will go through.
Today's passengers on the Dublin-Belfast corridor take for granted the crossing of the River Boyne at Drogheda. But for the early railway builders, the wide river with its clay bed and high banks on each side was a major obstacle. For several years in the 1850s, the railway between Dublin and Belfast was complete except for this short section. Any through passengers had to walk from one side to the other via the town centre. Clearly it was a great relief when the first permanent railway bridge was opened in 1855. This most impressive present-day structure was completed in 1932. One of its more unusual features is that it carries interlaced double track. One important point to remember after crossing the border is that although UK currency is often acceptable in the south, Irish punts are not legal tender in the north. Credit cards are welcome throughout Ireland, but a UK cheque drawn on an English bank cannot be accepted in the south. The best alternative to carrying lots of cash or cashing travellers' cheques is to take euro cheques, which are universally accepted. The line closely follows the coast, giving passengers plenty of tantalising glimpses of golden beaches and busy fishing harbours. Here the line crosses the River Nanny near Laytown. Although it's an important main line, there are still at present substantial pockets of manual signalling, with the real peat fire here lending an unmistakable Irish touch. All semaphore signals on Irish Rail are of the lower quadrant type. The nearest upper quadrants were at Larne on Northern Ireland Railway's territory. Soon the entire line will be modernised, and the quaint but highly photogenic signalling of today will give way to computerised central traffic control. Trains from Belfast terminate in the side platforms at Dublin-Connolly, where they connect with the DART system. Connolly's imposing Italianate facade was completed in 1846 and is one of Ireland's finest, making extensive use of Wicklow granite. The main line south from Connolly to the ferry port of Rosslare first threads its way through Dublin city centre. After passing through the city's southern suburbs, it then follows a sinuous but highly scenic route along the coast to Wicklow, Wexford and finally on to Rosslare. The first major feature, after leaving Connolly on the Loop line, is the bridge over the River Liffey. This city centre section of line was built in the 1890s to provide a much-needed link between Connolly and the original south-facing terminus at Pearse. It was from the old Westland Row station on the site of Pearse that Ireland's first regular passenger train departed in 1834. Today, Pearse is simply an intermediate calling point on the DART line. The Rosslare trains don't even stop here anymore. The double track and overhead wires for the DART trains stretch out from Dublin as far as Bray, a distance of about 13 miles. Loco-haul trains are very much in the minority here, with just 3 trains a day between Dublin and Rosslare, plus an extra rush hour service to and from Arklow. Coming into Bray, the remains of the old locomotive shed can still be seen on the downside of the line. Now they're used for stabling DART units. The 181 class locomotive that's hauling our train was built by General Motors in the mid-1960s. It has an output of 1,000 horsepower, and inside the cab it's very similar to other General Motors designs, with driving positions on both sides and this characteristic American-style handle for sounding the horn. The line between Bray and Greystones is without doubt the most spectacular stretch of railway in Ireland. It was a major feat of engineering to construct it, and to this day it remains an expensive section of railway to maintain. With the Wicklow Hills descending straight into the sea, there was no alternative but to build over and through solid rock. Originally there were 3 tunnels and 4 viaducts within the space of 5 miles. Constant problems with coastal erosion in the second half of the 19th century led to the building of a fourth tunnel, the longest at just over 1,000 yards. The open sections have to be patrolled regularly to check for rockfalls. Clearly, the line offers some quite splendid photographic opportunities, and if you're thinking of visiting the area, there's even a well-surfaced walkway between Bray and Greystones overlooking most of the route. For today's service levels, there's a lot of infrastructure here to maintain. Apart from the 4 daily passenger trains to and from Rosslare and Arklow, there are a limited number of freight trains using the route, mainly the ammonia workings to Shelton Abbey, plus occasional blockloads of fertiliser from Shelton Abbey and bagged cement to Wexford. There used also to be a regular passenger shuttle between Bray and Greystones, connecting with the Dart trains, but that was withdrawn in 1991 due to a rolling stock shortage and replaced by a bus connection. With the fourth and final tunnel now behind us, the landscape opens out quickly and the railway makes a leisurely descent towards the small coastal resort of Greystones. The loop at Greystones is signalled for reversible working, and it's normal for most trains to use the up platform because this has more convenient access for passengers. The imposing station building here is a reminder of busier times, when Greystones was a fashionable retreat for well-to-do Dubliners. Today, the faded elegance of the town is matched by its largely intact but rather underused railway facilities. Here at Greystones, our driver from Dublin swaps over with the northbound driver who's come up from Rosslare. On this occasion, the Dublin-bound train is being hauled by another of the 4 main types of General Motors locos, a 141 class. With the new driver at the controls, our train sets off on the next stage of its journey to Wicklow. Although the scenery is much less dramatic than it was around Bray Head, this section of line has suffered from coastal erosion too, and a 1-mile long stretch was actually moved inland in the 1970s to try and overcome the problem. The 9 miles from just south of Greystones to Wicklow form the longest stretch of level track in Ireland. Coming into Wicklow, the line diverges sharply inland over Broad Loch and loses sight of the sea for the first time since Bray. Waiting to pass in the up loop at Wicklow is this morning train of empty ammonia tanks from Shelton Abbey, typically hauled by a rostered 001 class locomotive. Most of the Irish locomotive fleet is now over 30 years old, and even though there's a new generation of locomotives on order, many of the older General Motors types will still be around for a good few years to come. Inchicore Works in Dublin is where all of the major maintenance work is carried out. In a small country such as Ireland, it makes good sense to concentrate all facilities on one location. The first works here was opened in 1845 by the Great Southern and Western Railway, and in the intervening 110 years there was an almost unbroken tradition of locomotive building and servicing on the site. Today, Irish Rail has a total fleet of about 120 available locos. The bulk of these are formed from the 4 General Motors classes imported from America in the 60s and 70s. To enable effective maintenance to be carried out, Inchicore carries huge stocks of General Motors spares, including everything from electrical switches to complete wheel sets and bogies. The 071 class represents the newest end of the Irish traction spectrum. 18 of these were delivered in the late 1970s. Clearly, Irish Rail is more than satisfied with the standard of workmanship supplied by General Motors. Even the 1 class of diesels not built by General Motors, the 001 class, were refitted with General Motors engines after their original power units had proved to be hopelessly unreliable within a few years of The 001 locomotives have now been around for nearly 40 years, but it's only fairly recently that some of them have been relegated to the scrap line. Inchicore is also responsible for Irish Rail's 300 passenger coaches. The City Gold vehicles we saw earlier were refurbished here, and most of the present-day fleet was assembled at Inchicore, even if the parts were supplied from Britain. Our train to Rosslare comprises of typical Mark IID stock, and our next port of call on the line south through County Wexford will be Enniscorthy. Irish Rail offers some very attractively discounted Rambler tickets. As well as rail only, it's possible to get combined road and rail and Northern Ireland tickets. In theory, it's possible to buy Irish Rail Rambler tickets in the UK, but in practice it's far more convenient to wait until you're in Ireland. The train service here at Enniscorthy is well used by local people. The very busy small station parcels office, although now virtually extinct in the UK, still earns plenty of useful revenue for Irish Rail, handling urgent same-day deliveries from Dublin. Leaving Enniscorthy, the line crosses the River Slaney before disappearing into a 400-yard tunnel under the town. It will then rejoin the course of the river and follow it all the way on to Wexford. Wexford may only have one platform, but at 542 feet it's exceptionally long. The loop and block post here were removed in the 1980s, although part of the goods yard is still in use for very occasional cement traffic. Wexford is an ancient port dating back to Viking times. One of the best ways to appreciate the maritime flavour of the place today is by train, as the main line runs for several hundred yards right along the seafront. There's a permanent speed restriction of 5 miles an hour on this unique stretch of railway. The closest comparison with Britain would be the Weymouth Quay tramway. But what makes the Wexford stretch so much more unusual is that it forms part of the long-distance through route from Dublin to Rosslare, which is in regular daily use. The railway really has virtually no space of its own here, although at one time things were even tighter when the quayside had a siding on the seaward side. The day's catch of whelk certainly seemed dangerously close to the track. On some days, the fishermen even have to swing back the boom arms of their fishing boats before the train can pass. Parked cars and vans loading fish can often pose a problem too, especially in the busy summer months. It's scenes like these that certainly give Irish Railways their unique, almost timeless quality. But this is also a working railway, functioning as a business and providing an essential service to the Irish people. The driver certainly needs a very high degree of concentration, particularly at night around closing time. At the south end of the quays, the line passes over an historic sea inlet using this bridge, which once included an opening span. It's been proposed to rebuild the bridge to carry road as well as rail traffic, although no physical work has been carried out yet. Beyond the bridge, the train accelerates past the site of Wexford South Station, once the terminus of the original branch from Rosslare, but closed in the 1970s. Rosslare Strand is where the lines from Dublin and Waterford come together for the last 3.5 miles to Rosslare Harbour. One curiosity of the line between Waterford and Rosslare Harbour is that it's owned by the Fishguard and Rosslare Railways and Harbours Company, the track being leased back to Irish Rail. The harbour terminus here was rebuilt in 1989. The new building offers very good passenger facilities and is deliberately styled on the lines of an air terminal. At present, the Irish pound, known as the punt, is trading virtually at parity with the UK pound, which makes for easy planning. We usually find it's best to change currency at the airport or on the ship. Although its total system is smaller than ScotRail, the combined networks of Irish Rail and Northern Ireland Railways offers tremendous variety of traffic, traction and scenery. It's also a railway that's benefiting from continued investment to equip it for the needs of the 21st century. For those who haven't sampled Ireland yet, we very much recommend a visit. We're sure that you too will receive a warm welcome. We do hope that you've enjoyed this look at the unique railroads of this fascinating country. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to Railroad Journeys Around the World. In this programme, we'll be looking closely at Ireland's current and highly stimulating rail scene. As we shall see, Ireland's railways draw on a rich railway heritage, which is still very much in evidence today. This, coupled with splendid scenery and a warm welcome throughout the island, make Ireland the ideal country in which to expand your horizons. In the Republic of Ireland, virtually all rail services are focused on Dublin. From the two principal city centre stations at Connolly and Heuston, you can catch a direct intercity train to most parts of Ireland. But Dublin also boasts a very interesting and rapidly growing network of suburban services for commuters and city centre shoppers. Suburban trains from Dublin Connolly to Drogheda in the north are locomotive hauled, in this case using one of the distinctive single cab locomotives built by General Motors in the 1960s. Connolly is not only a terminus for the Drogheda service, but also a through station for the electrified and distinctive green liveried Dart service, which runs between Bray and Howth. On the way to Drogheda, local trains make 10 intermediate calls. Trade is reassuringly brisk, although at present the service isn't all that frequent, about once an hour off-peak with some extra trains in the rush hour. Although the coaches are of a BR Mark III pattern, they benefit from the standard continental practice of having remotely closed plug doors. Most trains from Drogheda are push-pull operated, so that turnaround times on what's a fairly short itinerary can be kept to a minimum. The local service doesn't have the monopoly of these tracks. There are also intercity and freight services between Dublin and Belfast, as well as mineral trains from the freight-only King's Court branch on the left. All in all, Drogheda is one of the best places to witness the wide variety of Irish rail operations today. That rare luxury by British standards of being hauled or pushed by a diesel locomotive is an everyday occurrence on Irish rail. The traction will inevitably be a General Motors product, as all Irish rail locomotives since the 1960s have either been built or re-engined with General Motors traction units. Most of the coaching stock in use today is of British design, with sizable fleets based on both Mark IID and Mark III body shells. However, the 5 driving trailer coaches were produced by Irish Rail at Inchicore Works from Mark III body shells. It's a refreshing contrast to a rather depressing current British scene. Irish Rail is actually expanding of revenue. The latest initiative on the Cork line is a high-quality package for business customers, which is just one example of Irish Rail's willingness to think creatively.
The most recent new product that we've introduced has been our City Gold product, which is a new super standard first-class service on the Dublin-Cork line. We went out, carried out detailed market research of our existing customers and potential new customers. They told us that they needed something new, something more comfortable, better facilities, and we have provided that, and you can now travel from Dublin to Cork on our City Gold service. We branded it City Gold. You can sit in a much more comfortable seat. We have hostess attention for any assistance that you need. We've got telephone facilities, we've got fax facilities. You can sit and get your headphones and listen to the morning news or listen to some relaxing music if you so wish.
The set is complemented by this splendid matching open lounge car, available for exclusive private functions. It's 165 miles from Dublin to Cork. The fastest weekday service takes 2.5 hours, with intermediate stops at Limerick Junction and Mallow. In all, there are 7 trains each way, Mondays to Saturdays, and 4 on Sundays. Flying to Ireland is an attractive option if you intend travelling around by public transport or wish to hire a car. One advantage is the choice of destinations, which includes Galway, Shannon, Sligo, Dublin, Belfast and Cork, with plenty of regular daily flights from most major UK airports. Typical return fares are about £80. Mallow, a small spa town with an interesting history, is well known today as a sugar beet processing centre. It's also the junction for the popular holiday destination of Killarney in the west. The station has a relaxing, open, continental feel about it and provides a pleasant spot to watch the intense activity as the intercity and branch line trains connect. Expanding its services and winning new traffic from other transport modes, despite the fact that Ireland, with a total population of only 5 million people, has relatively few major cities and very little heavy industry. Privatisation in the Republic of Ireland is definitely not on the agenda, and among Irish rail managers there's a mood of optimism that would be hard to find anywhere on British rail today.
I'm delighted to say that during the past 2 years we carried more passengers on our rail network than ever before in the history of the rail network. And our goal over the next 5 years is to go on from there and to provide a quality customer-driven service and grow the business even further.
The flagship of Dublin's suburban railway network is the Dublin Area Rapid Transit System, usually referred to as DART. This is a high-quality, high-frequency electrified railway linking Dublin city centre with Howth in the north and Bray in the south. The DART system was commissioned in the early 1980s, and its concept was nothing short of total route modernisation. In all, 22.5 route miles were electrified, and 40 two-car electric multiple units were built. Although DART is a quite distinctive and unique operation, it fits well into the overall pattern of public transport in Dublin. Indeed, it follows the best of European practice and complements rather than competes with other services.
There are DART tickets available which allow flexibility to interchange. And our commuter tickets, be they weekly commuter tickets or monthly commuter tickets, are very, very popular. They allow interchange not only between DART and other suburban services, but also between our own rail services and the services that are offered by Dublin Bus within the city of Dublin, and of course Bus Éireann as well.
The Dart trains are of German origin and were supplied by Linker Hoffmann Busch. They normally operate in 4-car formation and provide a service frequency ranging from every 15 minutes off-peak to every 4 or 8 minutes in the morning and evening rush hours. Another aspect of Dart's integration into the national rail network is that the tracks are shared with Irish Rail mainline passenger and freight services for most of the route. The premier main line in the Republic of Ireland links the capital Dublin and the country's second city, Cork. It's double track all the way to Cork, and the track has been progressively upgraded and re-signalled for the benefit of the comparatively heavy regular traffic flows it handles, ranging from intercity passenger to bulk chemicals and liner trains. The line to Cork starts at Dublin Heuston, where the station building in grandiose Corinthian style is ranked among the finest of Irish railway architecture. It was completed in 1844 as a suitably imposing gateway to the Great Southern and Western Railway, the design having been selected from a total of 20 competition entries. Today, Heuston remains busy with intercity trains not only to Cork, but also to Westport, Galway, Limerick, Tralee and Waterford. In short, it serves the majority of mainline destinations in the Republic of Ireland. Heuston, with its 5 terminal platforms, is the only station in Dublin not on a through route, but its importance has increased in recent years with the diversion of Westport and Galway trains to serve Heuston instead of Connolly. Irish rail management is constantly looking at ways of improving services and attracting new sources